Hey guys, today I'm going to be discussing some of the movies that have inspired me growing up, that inspired me to become a movie critic. And these aren't necessarily my favorite films. Definitely not, because these are movies that more inspired me as a child, that made me kind of who I am today. But there are a couple movies in there that probably would make, like a top 100 list if I were to ever make one. But yeah, being a critic is kind of a weird thing. People usually associate it with, understandably, with people who maybe didn't quite have the talent or the success at becoming a filmmaker or an actor or whatever, so they became a critic. They always say, like, those who can't do teach, and I think it's kind of a similar thing. But I also think that there are people who are naturally really good at that sort of thing, really good at that kind of academic, analytical way of breaking down art, seeing the language of it, and being able to communicate it. Yeah, of course, if I had some great talent to become a director or an actor, maybe I'd be more willing to do that, but I don't know, like, I really do like doing this. And I think it comes from a place of really like having a respect for the art and the respect for cinema and filmmakers, and really just kind of wanting to kind of explore it and see how it can, be better, or how it changes over time. All that stuff genuinely fascinates me. But when you're a kid, you're not thinking about film criticism, or like maybe not necessarily in that way, in an academic sense anyway. When you're a kid, you're just responding to what you see on screen, and it means something to you. And it, certainly it did for me. My dad really introduced me to a lot of those kind of big classic movies. Star Wars was a huge, huge, huge influencer on me. And some people might be surprised by that, but yeah, when I was a child, I was obsessed with Star Wars. Absolutely obsessed. I made my own movies where I was Princess Leia. I was one of those nerds who knew everything about Star Wars. You could not fool me on any sort of trivia or any sort of anything like that. I would always win. I'm very rusty now, but it meant a lot to me, and it meant a lot to a lot of children. And I think that original series, especially like A New Hope and, Empire Strikes Back, those films really, like they were very special. It was kind of like that perfect example of what escapism could be, but in like a really kind of balanced way. The original film has all that sense of wonder and that love for being a kid, even if it is very much kind of your standard kind of typical hero's journey, typical tale, kind of serial cartoon Flash Gordon style. It's all been done before, just maybe not packaged in that particular way at that time. And of course it changed the way movies were made from then on, in my opinion, for the worst. But, it's not like that was George Lucas's fault. He was just doing something that he loved. And I think that's the difference between those Star Wars movies and the current ones. Those movies were independent, and they came from somebody who really wanted to challenge and do something because they loved it and they cared about it. They put their heart and soul into it. Now it's much more fueled by corporate ideas, corporate tie-ins, media marketing, how we can kind of infuse the nostalgia of those old films into this new packaged product so that people will see it, because nostalgia is something that people are obsessed with in this culture, in American culture, to, I think, toxic degrees. But that original series, you can't deny, it meant a lot to a lot of children. So many people became filmmakers, became writers, became cinematographers, became costume designers, became special effects supervisors because of Star Wars. My generation grew up with Star Wars. Now, of course, I've grown up a little bit. I'm not one of those people who continued to be like a crazy fangirl up through, I'm age 30 now. I grew up. I have different interests, but I can recognize that for what it was and appreciate it. And, as a kid, yeah, I was more drawn to spectacle because, I wasn't thinking about why things existed. I just knew what I enjoyed, what I responded to. And a lot of that tended to be the real big and cinematic. My dad was showing me Indiana Jones and, moments in that movie, like the throne room scene where he's putting down the staff and the swell of the orchestral music by John Williams. Moments like that stuck out to me in a way that I never forgot. That was back when Steven Spielberg was a lot less soft as he is now. He showed a lot of kind of gritty and dark stuff in those kinds of movies that were meant for children, and that danger was exciting. So those are very kind of like typical choices, but I will also say there were a lot of movies that were different from what a lot of kids were watching back then that really inspired me as a child. My father, he was never really into like Die Hard or like the action movies like a lot of fathers. My dad liked movies like Kramer versus Kramer and Sophie's Choice and Remains of the Day. So I I saw a lot of that stuff as a young kid too. And I don't know, for some reason, Remains of the Day sticks out in my mind as something that, you know, it was one of the first times as a little kid that registered as like, wow, there's something kind of mature about the style of it and kind of the artistry of it. It had kind of a poeticism to the aesthetic. And that was the first time I was consciously thinking that film can be really thoughtful and artistic in a way. Even though, you know, I haven't seen that movie in years, I remember it really sticking with me and, you know, informing the way that I saw art or the way I thought movies could seem. But also, you know, musicals have always been huge in terms of my formative years and what influenced me, and a lot of people know that as well. There's something about musicals. I am sure what it is. It's just like, you know, I know it's a very specific genre, and I know very niche in a lot of ways, but it's very cinematic, and it's so, like, you know, a lot of it depends on the filmmaking. I'm sorry, but, you know, watching a number on Broadway is very different from how it appears on film. I have seen West Side Story on stage. It does not, that opening sequence does not have the power, the dimension, that dynamic quality as it does when it's shot on film. The movement of it, the cinematic quality to it, it's like a Western. It feels so modern. All of those things make that sequence to me just so timeless. But it's a lot of the big musicals, like movies that really, really influenced me and changed my life were movies that, like Gene Kelly did, like An American in Paris. That film has my heart. Like it just does. Every time I see it, just the color and the spectacle and the use of music, you know, George Gershwin music and Gene Kelly dancing and, you know, singing at his most charismatic. Vincent Minnelli, one of the great directors of his time, directing. Oscar Levant is in the film. Leslie Caron, just all this amazing talent. And then you watch that final sequence, the big ballet sequence at the end. It's around, 15, 16 minutes long. And I know it's influenced by The Red Shoes. But what they do with it, every time I watch it, I start crying. Like, I just do. It has everything I love. Just, you know, the color and the painting, kind of the French painters that it's drawing influence from in terms of the sets and just the choreography and the cost. It has everything that I love about movies. It has everything, and done so beautifully. I'm like, this is what happens when true collaboration and confidence and talent and all of that comes together. It is a miracle. And something about that film and in Singing in the Rain, especially, though that I started to appreciate more when I was a little bit older. But stuff like that, I always remember very vividly as strong. Busby Berkeley movies as well, just the cinematic quality of it. I just had never seen anything like that. Fred Astaire taught me what it means to kind of let a moment exist. Be very simple. Just allow the dancing and the story of the dance to unfold while the camera is very still. The less is more sort of thing that I'm always trying to communicate. A lot of those old movies have a lot of that less is more. They have more of a confidence in that foundation compared to a lot of the mainstream films today. And I think because I watched a lot of older movies back then, it really helped me kind of figure that out now. Of course, I'd be crazy if I didn't mention Lord of the Rings. Everybody, or I should say, a lot of people who have watched me for many, many years, especially the ones from the very beginning, know that my name used to not be Deep Focus Lens. It was Loader Lover MR, which, you know, I regretted it. It was just something I came up with when I was like 16 years old as my YouTube handle. Lord of the Rings was our generation's Star Wars, you know, the thing that came out, this thing that, you know, it was so ambitious, and it's like it couldn't possibly be made, but somehow it was made by a guy from New Zealand, and everything done in New Zealand. You know, that could never happen today. And as a child, much like Star Wars, you know, I've seen those films dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of times. It's the scope of them, the attention to those miniatures, you know, combining both the CGI and things that are built, and just the attention to detail in the costumes and the worlds, the conceptual design in terms of the artist creating the worlds. The amount of passion that went into that film was extraordinary. And I think a big part of what informed my generation in terms of how we look at the behind the scenes of how films are made were special features on DVDs. You know, like our parents' generation didn't have that. We did. And Lord of the Rings has maybe one of the most extensive I've ever seen. If you have the special edition DVDs, they are just so extensive. I mean, like each one is like a novel. Anything you want to know about the making, it's on there. It is hours and hours and hours and hours of behind the scenes footage and put together in a way that is really, really well done. And I learned so much from things like that. I learned so much from special features. My family, my dad, he was really into like, big tech things, like the latest sort of thing. And we had a DVD player kind of early on, back when a lot of people didn't, because my dad really wanted one. So it was very expensive. And, I think we got it in like 1999, I want to say. And I remember thinking it was amazing because, like what you can listen to the directors do a commentary throughout the movie so I can hear how they make it. This was just a revelation to me. So I did, I would watch all the movies my dad would get, but I'd watch them with the commentary. I remember one Sunday afternoon, one of my dad's, sentimental favorite movies is Field of Dreams. So naturally, I grew up watching that movie over and over as well. And as a kid, we watched it together. My dad falls asleep, so I just played the movie again, just sat, watched, and listened to the commentary. And I learned so much. I absorbed so much from what those directors, those writers, those actors say about the process. And then that's, I think, what drew me more to the behind the scenes. I think as a kid, I really wanted to act and I wanted to do that sort of thing because all I knew is what I saw. But then I learned that there's so much behind it that is so extraordinary and interesting. And I'm forever indebted to Lord of the Rings for giving me all of that. Just so much about it, reminds me of the old epics. Yes, as an adult, I have a lot of issues with all three films, and I'm very vocal about them. I recognize the flaws as they are, and at some point, I really need to review them. I mean, it's crazy that I haven't because it used to be my own handle and the movie I was so obsessed with for such a long time. But again, like Star Wars, it has a place in my history for why it got me to where I am. In high school, that's when I really started to get into film more in an academic sense. I loved Roger Ebert and Siskel, and they inspired me. I watched that as a little kid, and something in me just was like, I want to do that. I don't know why. I don't know what it was. I just wanted to. I connected with it. And I think that carried through. And then I became, when I was in high school, I was like, yeah, I really do like this aspect of it. So I started going more towards that. I started out as a film major in college. Almost everybody there wanted to be a writer, like a screenwriter or a director or something, and I really didn't. I was more interested in the film history and the academic aspects of things. And so in high school, I thought it was kind of beneficial to study the history. That is how I got so good. That is why I have such a strong history. I have a strong knowledge of film history. I studied really, really hard. I studied all on my own, not because anyone forced me. I just enjoyed it. And I think through that, I saw a lot of new films, a lot of new classics that, completely changed my point of view. Like Fellini films, as an example. David Lynch was huge, huge in terms of, it spoke a language to me. Not the first David Lynch movie I saw, but the first one consciously that I remember seeing where it really was informing the way that I see the world was Blue Velvet, and it was everything that I thought, everything I felt in my subconscious about the way that films try to manipulate us, the way they try to serve us in this way that is kind of very creepy and off-putting and in a way that I don't think they're aware of. All of that was in David Lynch in a way that was funny, in a way that was strange, surrealistic. It just did things that I had never seen before. It was like Hitchcock, but twisted into something much different in a neo-noir sense. And that just changed everything. And from then on, anything that David Lynch did, I would take it and really watch it over and over and really think about it in a way that I hadn't to that degree. Miyazaki films were huge for me. Disney films were absolutely huge for me. Movies like Fantasia changed the way that I saw the way that you could do animation. It could be really trippy and abstract, and it can be something that's more sensory mixed with music, the way that film is, in a way, kind of the purest form of film, and even silent films. That really helped me experience movies as a language. I learned so much from all of it. The Red Shoes is a huge one, though, for me. I think that's the one, I think I saw it maybe when I was I want to say 17 or 18, I really don't know. And that just changed everything for me. I don't know what it was about that film, but it's just the kind of, I don't know how to say it. There's something about, there is an authenticity to the kind of the behind the scenes. It's got a very behind the scenes quality to it where it really is trying to examine the dance world and the art world, the music world, how it all comes together. And then there's this other aspect of it that's really surreal and trippy and very, very kind of impressionistic. It's like a mix of those two things. And it is kind of an examination of the way we are manipulated by the smoke and mirrors of things, how that affects us internally. A lot of people will say the film is pretentious, and you know what? I can't disagree with that necessarily, but I think there is a real awareness to that pretension. And the Archers, you know, the makers of The Red Shoes and Black Narcissus and other amazing films like that, saw movies in a way that were just so creative. The colors and the special effects, things that they were doing had never been done before. And yeah, it changed me. I don't know if I can ever really express that. That ballet sequence, it is my love of dance. It is my dance background. It is my love of kind of classical music or music that has that quality to it. It's my love of great special effects and surrealism. Everything that I love that make film interesting is there in that film. And I don't know, it's something about that made me want to think, why do I love this movie so much? I will tell you something. Being a film critic might seem easy because it's like you're just sitting here talking about it. But I think the difference between the good ones and the, you know, average ones is being able to explain why you like something. The why question is a very, very hard one. And if you can get a handle on that, that will help you. So, you know, those are just a few examples of movies, but I'd say that covers kind of, you know, at least on a basic level, some bulleted points on movies that really influenced me as I grew up and decided to do this for YouTube. There are a lot of amazing films out there. There are a lot of shitty movies out there, and all kinds in between that have influenced me in some ways. But my favorite movies tend to be the types of things that can only be movies. Like, they just can't exist in real life. And I think a lot of the movies that I mentioned have that. But yeah, I'd like to know, like, you know, movies that inspired you, that influenced you. Again, not necessarily your favorite movies. I want to know. I think that stuff is really kind of cool and positive and interesting to discuss in comment sections. But yeah, no, thank you guys so much for listening. That is the video. As an artist myself, I may not be a filmmaker or anything like that, but I do sketch, I do commissioned portraits, and I sell prints of my work as well. All of that you can find on my website at deepfocuslens.com. If you are interested in a commission or a print, something like that, just let me know. If you have any questions about it, you can email me. I have my email below, and I'm happy to chit-chat with you about it. And also, here are my Patreon supporters. I appreciate you guys so much. You have no idea. If you are interested in becoming a patron, the link to support that is below, as well as all of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.